Conversations with Nicole. Conversations with Nicole. Let's talk about it. Tell me all about it. I'm here. I wanna know what's on your mind. Ooh, the world needs to hear from you, and I'm so glad to have a conversation to reach the nation. And it's all about you. We'll help each other to discover innovative ways to positively change the world. Let's talk about. Let's talk about. Yeah. Let's talk about conversations with Nicole.
Greetings. Welcome to Conversations with Nicole. I am Nicole Everett, your host, and today's guest is no stranger to CWN. He's actually a CWN alum, featured on season 2 back in 2016, Mr. Dominick Ard'is. Welcome, Dominick.
Hey, Nicole. How you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Good to see you.
Good to see CWN is still going strong.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
5
so much growth
years.
over the years. That's
yes,
crazy.
I know, right?
That's consistency, though.
It is,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah,
Now,
kudos to you.
thank you. When you were last here, you were with Dominick Station.
Was I?
Yes.
I think I just came on board.
Uh-huh.
I had left Booz Allen Retail Commercial Consulting and just came on board as Director of Incubation Programs at Dominick Station with Lucas Lindsay.
Absolutely.
Was the ED there.
Yeah.
Golly, that's such a long time ago. I think I was wearing a blazer that episode,
You
too,
were.
right? I haven't worn a blazer in a very
You
long
were dressed the
time.
part.
Yeah. You see me in black T-shirts now for the most part.
Right.
Yeah.
That means you're a boss now.
Nah. I think I just put less attention and energy and decision-making processes into what I'm wearing these days.
Gotcha.
So, yeah. How have you been?
I've been well.
Good.
So now CEO of the Act House.
Yeah. You know, I think 2016, 2017, 2 years fully at Dominick Station, and you know, Lucas, Lindsay, and I, we really had a great time, like kind of shaping vision there. Sabrina Torres, who was definitely in the helm as well. All of it, we just had fun, right? It was pretty much at the beginning of what I would say it's more like the germination of like the seed, like the blossoming taking place for the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and Domi was kind of HQ of that. And you know, 2-3 cohorts later of the Get Started program, which we were able to kind of redesign and build out. Some successful startups that have came out of that, which have been great. And then the Power Up program, which was a huge hit. I think we did that with First Commerce, if I'm not mistaken. Was fantastic. You know, the companies that we were able to assist and help and all that stuff was great. But I'm a tinkerer, so for me, I love the sport of incubation, of what does it take to really kind of take a company from like idea stage to concept stage to MVP and to have them scale. And when I first came back to Tallahassee, I was already thinking about the Act House and what I would do. And it was, how can you have a startup house where people live in one house to create one startup in 1 year? Like that was the premise. But Act, of course, was, our team model, like the architect, the creative, the techie, and bring these skill sets together. So after testing it, that team model in a hackathon, and improved strong efficacy of rapid prototype development by like 800% over a course of 3 years. It was just time to cut ribbon. And so Shanta Friday Stroud, I think Andrew Gillum at the time, I think President Larry Robinson was there. A lot of community denizens were there, which was great. And, we opened the Act House, and it's been an exciting journey ever since. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what's the plan for Act House now?
Yeah, it's interesting, to think about where we started. We've always had this vision of how can you have Act House, which kind of migrates into Act Villages, but also have Act Ventures, which then invest in these companies, right? And, when you're talking about accelerating the impact of underestimated founders, particularly those of people of color, you oftentimes, like there's the the resources from a programmatic standpoint, then there's like the funding gap, right? How do you meet that? And we started off in more of a nonprofit model. 2019, we shifted to our for-profit model and really thinking about co-living as a service, right? Meaning, how can you have shared space, double occupancy rooms, take the kind of market rate of living, reduce that by 25% to create an access point for people to have still like group dope living spaces to live in, and also to access to high-powered incubation. And so we're able to really achieve that and really show value in the marketplace. It was interesting in the model where it was like, hey, come live here, it's free of rent and free utilities, right? We had about 19 applications for 3 people. When it was 6 people, and we said, pay with 25% less than the marketplace, and you still have access to high-powered incubation, mentors, and a network of folks. We had 81 applications.
Really?
It was the craziest thing ever. But, we did our focus groups, our testing, split A/B testing, and I think it was just something that people could trust. I think the earlier version was too good to be true. And with the new generation, it's like, that's got to be a scam, right? Like I need to work for something. So that was interesting. We had 6 residents, and that was 2019. And then, of course, 2019 bled into 2020. And I'm pretty sure you've had so many conversations about that aspect of 2020.
I have.
Which was a challenge for us. 2020 really started off as a rocket, and it still continued as a rocket. It just had different terrain to go through, right? And
I like how you put that.
Yeah, it's the best way to put it, right? The rocket was still going, but the environment, the wind, the temperature, you pretty much were in an oven the whole time just cooking. So I think we were a little bit too close to the sun in 2020. But I would say what happened with us in that earlier part, we had just got accepted to Techstars, which is a kind of a blue chip accelerator, and received an investment from them. And we were in Atlanta, Georgia the plan was to be there for about 3-4 months, and really kind of build out what we're doing there and really begin to test that market, which is great because we wanted to expand out in the Southeast. Simultaneously, we had 6 residents in the ACT House, and they were expanding to 54. We had already locked down all our properties, had 16 people confirmed to be in our fall cohort of 2020, 2021 in January, 50 more people to interview. I mean, it was
Wow.
all cylinders were just like on go.
And how many properties are we talking about? Roughly?
So I think at that time, for the 54, I think that was spread across 4 to 5 different properties.
Okay.
So the partners at Elevate, we ended up doing a deal with them, which is great. Had some other properties along FAMU Way, which was great. And we had students from Florida State, FAMU, all applying into the ACT House. And so the energy was just good. And everybody, internally, the team just knew our chant, right? It was, if somebody said, hey, I have this cool idea, somebody would respond and say, how does it help us get to 54? Period.
Okay.
Right? And if somebody else said something else, how does it help us get to 54?
So that was the hashtag.
Yeah, I'm about to go on break. How does it help you, dogs? But that was the energy, right? 54.
Right.
So it was the hashtag, it was the mantra, it was the prayers before you go to sleep. Everybody was just
Trying to get to 54.
Absolutely.
Got
So
it.
16 was met, 50 to interview at the end of March 31st. And mid-March, everybody knows what happened.
Right.
And so we had to monitor it. When the school shut down, that was a huge indicator for us. We were kind of already looking at what was happening globally as far as like in China, the Middle East, Europe, like what the patterns were. So we probably knew that we were headed down that same path of things just going completely silent. And it rocked us. And we had to make a huge pivot, nothing that changed dynamically what we did, but it augmented how we focus on our method of delivery.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it was interesting.
So what lessons did you learn during the pandemic about yourself?
Oh, about myself. I need community, right? Like the pandemic has been great, but it's also allowed allowed you to kind of like stretch out and capture community in other spaces. I've always been pretty good at that, but I think that was something that was very key and critical, right? Having a whiteboard to get creative with your team is like so important. And so that was like not present anymore. So then how do you adapt? So I think what I learned was, personally, I learned that community is important. Really, you have to have an internal like self-motivator to keep going and drive. And then you also have to just trust your internal compass, right? For me, I felt that I was on the right path of that. And there was no doubting it. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. As a businessman or business person, you have this part in startup culture where you're a founder, right? Like the name even founder just sounds so dope, right? And you have founder and CEO. I think last year, I no longer consider myself a founder.
Really?
It was just CEO.
Okay.
Like,
So you
tough decisions had to be made.
It evolved.
Yeah, tough decisions had to be made. So, example, the 54 residents and fellows in Act House would have eclipsed us like well into like 6 digits worth of revenue, right? To make the decision to say, we're not going to put people's lives at risk because we do double occupancy. So people share space, which means that the ability for the coronavirus to spread is a little bit more rapid. We won't do that, right? So making that decision and making it knowing that we would not, there was a line and a gap of revenue that we had to make up when we were looking at taking team members to W-2, that was tough, right? And you just got to swallow the pill. Telling my team in April when everybody was kind of worried about their jobs, you can kind of feel the angst and the energy and stuff like that. And just getting ahead of it and letting everybody know, look, hey, I'm not letting go of anybody, period. Now I'm also saying this knowing that I don't know where the revenue is going to come from, right? But I trust my gut enough to know, and I have enough strategy and insight to find it, right? But letting my team know, hey, we're not cutting anybody. And I think that level of support bonded us together, brought us very close.
No doubt.
And then...
And how big is your team?
7 people.
Okay.
Yeah, 7 people. 9 in about a month, but 7, yeah. So now that was something that really brought us together, had us, all of us fight together. And then I would say, last but not least, what's mission critical? You know, oftentimes in startup culture, and it's just in business, and no matter what project you're working on, you do so many things for external validation that it doesn't even make sense, right? Oh, well, you need to be on this social light and this medium and do this and do that. All things that generate buzz, but oftentimes don't transition to revenue.
Right, the conversion.
Exactly. And so for us, what was mission critical about everything that we did was the ACT model. Architects, creatives, and techies. It gets down to people. Architects are more the business, UX, visionary, strategist mindsets and skill sets. Creatives are more your branders, marketers, and designers. Techies are more your programmers, makers, and doers. And so, you know, in that regard, it helped us focus on what's mission critical. And we started taking off virtually, creating partnerships with the likes of Microsoft and other large corporations and virtual hackathons, bringing students from PWIs, HBCUs, HSIs together in virtual hacks. In June, when the killing of George Floyd happened.
Hold that thought.
You got it.
And when we come back from the break, we'll dive into that deeper.
You got it.
All right. Stay tuned for more conversations.
I'm Barbie Moro with Red Eye Coffee. Join me with Conversations with Nicole on the Greater Works Network.
Conversations with Nicole.
The number 10 means longevity. It means that you've been doing something that you love for a long time and that you're good at it.
What does the number 10 mean to me? 10, decade, new era, new beginning. One of the first memories I have is learning my times tables. And the easiest times tables of all were the multiples of 10. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. It made math easy for an English major like myself.
The number 10 to me means victory. It means community, collaboration. It means wholeness.
The number 10 means to me, if you think of in terms of 1 out of 10, 10 is top tier. So number 10 means you're the best.
Congratulations to Conversations with Nicole for 10 full seasons. That is amazing.
Conversations with Nicole. Let's talk about. Let's talk about. Let's talk about. Conversations with Nicole.
Welcome back to Conversations with Nicole. If you're just joining us, I am talking to Dominick Ard'is, CEO of the Act House. And before the break, Dominick, we were talking about the shift in 2020.
Yeah.
Some of, what went on and how you navigated that.
Yeah.
I specifically want to talk about the systemic racism and what we saw with the death of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and the racial unrest and social injustice that took place and how that affected you and your business.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like a lot of our work is highly focused on the economic side of racial equity in a lot of ways, right? Of how do you begin to raise the equity profile of Black and brown founders while still focusing on the elements of reconciliation between all races and cultures. One thing that we aspire to do and to get to that point, but we know that handling the equity is definitely a key thing, right? So because our team is digitally focused, purpose conscious, and like highly aware, and our community that we serve, like young people are like in the midst of it all, it impacts dramatically. I think for the first time, myself, and first time in a long time, I would say, seeing Ahmaud Arbery like literally murdered, like hunted in
Dog
essence.
and Wild Black.
You're right, and that one for me was I literally laid still for probably like 2 hours, in my, everybody has a home office now, but on my bed, that's where my home office is, in my room, but just kind of out of it. And then, in June, when George Floyd was killed, I actually lived a block away from where he was killed in Minneapolis. And that area is not rough. It's not bad. It's not a tough area. It's downtown. There's high rises around. Cool, you have a corner store here and there, but that's just what it is. And to see that, and I think more so, the part that was the most vicious for me was the look in that officer's eyes who killed him. Mm-hmm. And it kind of reminded me about just where still our society is, where there are the hidden pockets of our society that still believe in hatred, still choose to see the color of one's skin and not the content of their character. I think that part is still evident. And so for us, we couldn't ignore it. Mm-hmm. We were having a virtual hackathon, but we said, you know what, let's focus this around social innovations that can, one, end police brutality, but also to uplift our communities, right? And that hackathon was like so awesome because you got a chance to direct some of the pent up energy, aggression, pain, experience that people were feeling and direct it into innovation, right? Seeing problems, getting to solution, right? And I think it was a productive way for those who felt they couldn't hit the street and protest, or that wasn't enough for them, to kind of direct their energy. And also to creating a safe space through the partnership with, I think it was Talkspace, of just having mental health specialists like be there and have conversations with these innovators, right?
That's excellent.
Because it's a very real thing. Now, for myself personally, how I was affected, because I think oftentimes in leadership, you're looked to a lot to have a word to say, have solutions, have any of that. I gave myself agency and space not to have any answers.
Okay.
I got the hell out of town. Yeah, and
Sometimes that's the best thing to do.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was so worth it. I've never been to Idaho a day in my life, and went out to Boise, Idaho with a couple of friends and the whole startup scene, and we talked about the stuff out there. It's what's happening, but also we're able to kind of get on a mountaintop and see, almost like it was an out of body experience of seeing above what was happening, right? And seeing what all the distractions are, and this is happening in the midst of a global pandemic, health pandemic.
Right.
So it was challenging, but we got through it.
Now, as an African American entrepreneur, what advice would you give to new founders and startups coming on? Online?
Yeah. It's interesting because I think in the landscape of entrepreneurship, there's an idea and there is a mantra of by any means necessary. I think most African Americans who find themselves in business have that preset. It's kind of already downloaded in the DNA, unfortunately.
The hustle.
The hustle, right? Navigating, certain experiences because you have to. And so, I would say one, if you're coming into the space, try not to have the experiences that you've had with prejudice and racial injustice, like be your first lens of how you look at the word no, right? Because in the realm of understanding if your product or your market or understand that product market fit, right? You're gonna hear no a lot, but the no is really an opportunity to find new data, information, and insight of if your product is really matching with your customer. For me, I always look at race with the fifth lens. It is not something that I look at immediately. And I think honestly, if I don't, then everything that WEB and Rosa and Martin all shared and taught us, that I'm doing myself a disservice and I'm doing them a disservice of not clinging to the wisdom. I have to be aware of the societal structures that are in place. I have to be aware of what region of the country that I'm in, right? In order to navigate, but it's still looking at someone's character and focusing how I'm moving in the business world with folks in that direction. So that's been interesting. And it's been more interesting as we've been kind of the next frontier of Act House and this kind of acceleration and expansion that's taking place now, that we were kind of right the ship at the end of the 2020 to kind of lead us into some of the new work we're doing in 2021. So yeah.
It's interesting that you say that because again, in 2020, we saw it was like black was the new black, and you saw Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben get fired, and people embracing Juneteenth like never before. So
that's an interesting thing too, because I think there's two aspects of it, right? What the global health pandemic allowed was for people to sit still like you and I are doing right now, to actually see what Black Americans go through on a consistent basis, right? Everybody was able to sit still and see it. So humanity had a chance to kind of like understand what's really happening and not get caught up in the busyness of life. And I think that was a huge reason why you saw a lot of people have a visceral reaction to care, to give, to stand in solidarity in a lot of ways. It doesn't mean that most of it I think is genuine. That's my hope. Some of it you can tell is disingenuous. But it shouldn't stop there, right? Like, it's called deep work for a reason, right? It's continual, right? We as human beings, we evolve and we continue to unfold more about our lives as we live it. And so I think when you have the opportunity to, sit still, you can awaken to a couple of things. And I think that happened a lot in 2020. We'll see how it continues to flow out in 2021 and 2022 and beyond.
Absolutely.
But hopefully there's true heart change and transformation.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Now, what's the best advice you've either given or received?
And from 2020 or just
in
period?
general.
Yeah. Best advice I've ever given or received. A couple of things. One, have integrity. Just be honest. be honest and be authentic. That's helped me navigate my own personal challenges in life. That's helped me navigate relationships, whether it be friends, parents, business partners, whatever it may be. I think if you can handle that with grace, it's good. I recently received some advice from a colleague out west, and she had received this advice from someone else, and it was in relationship to her parents. And it said, your parents may be like 65 or 70 or whatever, right? But what is the age of their emotional intelligence? And that has a lot, like that statement alone just kind of brings forth empathy all at the forefront to have with people and to understand that everybody doesn't have your orientation into life, right? How I deal with transitions is very different than how a counterpart would, because I was a military brat. So me having to adapt and shift and move, there's a preset that's there that turns on, right? So, I think that was another piece of advice. And at the end of the day, keep soaring, stay innovative, and be kind to people around you as you're growing up.
Love it.
Yeah.
My final question.
Uh-oh.
What is your greater work?
My greater work.
Which would be the equivalent of asking what's your superpower?
Yeah. I don't know. I think those things are kind of different for me right now.
Okay, well, break it down for us.
I think the greater work is what's happening right now. Interesting enough, I'm 33 years old, turned 34 this year. But 2 weeks ago, I asked myself the question. I always ask myself this question as I go forward. Am I in my purpose? Am I doing the right things? And everybody says, 33 is the Jesus year. I'm like, well, Jesus died at 33. Like, I have much props for my Savior, but at the same time, I think I still got some more work to do. Like, he killed it in 3 years,
right.
Literally. I wasn't that efficient. So I had to reflect back, and it's like, when did he get started at 30? And it was literally 2017 when I turned 30, and a week and a half later, we cut ribbon on Act House. So now I feel like what's happening now with Act House is the greater work. We're moving into venture capital, opening up Act Ventures, opening up an accelerator in Tulsa, in Greenwood, Black Wall Street, investing in roughly about 45 entrepreneurs over time, raising a $5 million fund to actually run the accelerator, and raising a $20 million equity fund later this year. And it's great to see that work come into full fruition, which leads to my transitioning, but also to it's just expansion of the work to be able to come back one day and provide greater resources for my city. But my superpower is always to facilitate human potential, whatever medium that may be. I may have to show up as the CEO that is corralling and encouraging everybody to go forward, or I may be mediating conflict between a government and a neighborhood, which happened here in Tallahassee. But it's all those exciting things, but it's just to facilitate human potential, get people from point A to point B.
And you do it very well.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for taking time to talk with me today. I really appreciate it, and keep up the great work.
I appreciate you. Definitely do. Many blessings.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us on Conversations with Nicole, where we are connecting the community through conversations. We'll see you next time.